Poverty and education are closely connected to one another because education can mark the difference between a life below and a life above the poverty line. Education promotes economic growth because it provides skills that increase employment opportunities and income. According to the UNESCO Institute for Statistics, in 2015, almost 300 children and youth are out of school around the world. Children do not attend school for many reasons, but they are all due to lack of money. Families living in poverty often have to choose between sending their children to school or providing other basic needs. Some children are forced to stay at home to work, and if families cannot afford the costs of school, they are more likely to send boys than girls. The UNESCO study shows that the majority of these out-of-school populations are located in the poorest areas of Africa and Asia, but nevertheless, even in the rich United States of America and Canada, money issues stop lots of people from attending universities and colleges. The US has some of the world's best colleges, but they are extremely expensive. The average cost for tuition just keeps growing, and young people are forced to spend years to repay their student loans. Costs have grown not only for public and private national universities, but also for community colleges, which are public colleges. But what's the difference between university and college? Universities are big institutions that offer bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees. Colleges are normally smaller and also offer a 4-year education program. But there are also the community colleges that last 2 years and give the opportunity to focus on a certain job. The United States has a wide variety of institutions that provide higher education. A public university, also commonly called a state university, is funded by the government and is less expensive than a private university. The Columbia University in New York City costs around $65,000 per year and is the most expensive private university, while the most expensive public university is the University of Cincinnati in Ohio that costs around $24,000 per year. In Canada, tuition fees are generally less expensive than in other major destinations such as the United States, United Kingdom, and Australia, although they are still quite high in comparison to other countries. A Canadian student can expect to pay an average of 6,000 Canadian dollars per year. On the other side, universities in Italy are some of the world's oldest and most prestigious, but most of the public ones are as good as the private ones, are much more affordable, and there are reduced tuitions for less rich students. For example, the Bocconi University, that is one of the most prestigious private universities, costs around €14,000 per year.
News broke in March 2019 that Hoffman was charged in the Justice Department's investigation into rigging college admissions. Nicknamed Operation Varsity Blues, the probe concluded that numerous people had conspired to use bribery and other forms of fraud to get their kids into top colleges. The US actress has been sentenced to 14 days in prison for her involvement in a college admission scandal in 2017. Federal prosecutors accused Hoffman of stepping over a moral line for which she deserved prison, despite her request to avoid it. She must also do 250 hours of community service and pay a $30,000 fine. Hoffman worked with a lot of people to falsify a college entrance exam score for her oldest daughter, Sophia Macy. She admitted to paying $50,000 to have her daughter's exam answers secretly corrected. More than 50 people among parents, coaches, test administrators, and conspirators were charged in the scandal, in which prosecutors said mastermind William Singer either facilitated cheating on standardized tests. Of those charged, more than 30 are parents accused of conspiring. In a statement after her sentencing, she said, "There are no excuses or justification for my actions. Period. I would like to apologize again to my daughter, my husband, my family, and the educational community for my action."
In the United States, public and private schools exist at every level of education, from pre-kindergarten through university programs. Public schools are funded and regulated by the state and/or federal government, while private schools are funded through tuition and donors and are not as strictly regulated. One of the biggest factors separating public and private schools is the cost of tuition. Depending on where you live, you may have different options, but the general rule is that private schools are far more expensive than public schools. If we're talking pre-college education, the cost of tuition is practically free. For state-run colleges and universities, American tax dollars help subsidize the cost of tuition, especially for students attending school in their home state. Private schools, colleges, and universities have to fund all their programs, pay teachers' salaries, and more without federal or state aid. As a result, tuition for private school students typically begins at $10,000, while some of the most expensive private schools in America range between $49,000 to $60,000. Public schools are far more popular than private schools for the average American family. With this fact comes another one of the main differences between private and public schools: class size. Fewer students mean smaller class size, which is generally considered a positive trait at any level as it allows for more direct teacher-to-student interaction. Students in public schools, anywhere from kindergarten through college, tend to experience larger class sizes. Public schools are worse than private, and the only valid are situated in rich neighborhoods, so give your sons a good education is a privilege.
Lorenzo Milani was a young religious boy who was appointed chaplain in October 1947 at the gates of Florence. Don Milani was convinced that it is the duty of the Church to take care of the education of its faithful, especially the weakest. As soon as he arrived, Don Milani made a symbolic gesture. He built his popular school for young workers and peasants in Barbiana. There, he began his commitment to give people the maximum possible acculturation, in the sense of knowledge, but mostly the use of critical ability. Don Milani decided to start from reading the newspapers in class, analyzing current issues. He was convinced that only culture can help the poor to overcome their resignation and that the use of the word is equivalent to wealth and freedom. The motto of Don Milani's school is "I care, that concern me, and I take care." On the walls hangs a mosaic made by the students and depicts a boy with a halo reading a book. He is the new saint of Barbiana, the Holy Scholar. In 1967, Don Lorenzo Milani published another book, Letter to a Teacher, written together with the boys of the Barbiana school. The book denounces the backwardness and inequality of the Italian school, which discourages the weakest and pushes the strongest forward. It seems to be inspired by a class principle and not by solidarity, an indictment of the entire school system.
With the coronavirus pandemic, the concept of school has been revolutionized. Distance learning, called DAD in Italy, has been deeply developed in these months, but many students haven't got devices or a good internet connection, so following lessons is very difficult for these unlucky guys. In a survey of 25,000 students, 27% stated that they do not have enough devices to follow the lessons and at the same time allow their parents to work. 23% of families with students has problems of internet connection, and these data concern the whole Italian national territory. We can easily understand that doing school in this difficult time is converting into being a kind of privilege, because poor families aren't able to guarantee a good connection and enough devices to let one or more sons following lessons. For these people, the situation was better when schools were open, because fortunately, state schools in Italy are much better, more common and developed than in America, and their costs are really low, so also poor families can give their sons an education.